In a bustling valley town, where paved brick lanes wound between steep stone walls and a towering clock tower dominated the skyline, there lived a young man named Lucas. He was healthy, clear-eyed, and possessed an intellect that could have mastered any craft. Yet he spent his days leaning lazily against a massive ancient oak tree on the edge of the hill, watching clouds drift aimlessly away into the horizon. To Lucas, the concept of an hour was entirely abstract. He believed, as the young often do, that time was a free, infinite river that would never run dry. Lucas did not see the hours as currency. He saw them as space to be filled with nothing. He would toss small pebbles into the grass, delay his small daily chores, and wake up long after the sun had reached its peak in the sky. He lived in a perpetual state of tomorrow. When his friends urged him to study a trade or seek out the traveling merchants for an apprenticeship, Lucas would merely smile, shake his head, and reply that he had plenty of time. He was a millionaire in moments, yet completely bankrupt in ambition. His father, a deeply disciplined merchant whose face bore the noble wrinkles of a lifetime of hard work, watched Lucas from the window of his stone workshop. The old man's heart grew heavier with each passing season. He knew a truth that his son was entirely blind to. The market of life is brutal, and it charges a terrible interest rate on wasted days. One evening, as the shadows of the valley stretched long and blue across the brick streets, the father called Lucas into his private study. The study was a quiet sanctuary filled with the aroma of old paper, cedar shavings, and candle wax. The old man sat behind a heavy oak desk, his hands resting flat on the surface. When Lucas entered, tilting his head with casual curiosity, the father reached into a leather pouch and placed a single heavy gold coin directly between them. The polished metal caught the low flame of the oil lamp, gleaming intensely against the dark wood. "Lucas," the father said, his voice a low, steady rumble, "if I were to place this gold coin in your hand every single morning, tell me, honestly, would you walk down to the river and cast it into the rushing water before the sun sets?" Lucas let out a short, dismissive laugh, leaning back against the stone wall. "Of course not, father," he replied, folding his arms. "That would be madness. Money represents labor, trade, and survival. It has tangible value. Throwing it away would be destroying our wealth." The father looked down at the gleaming coin, his fingers tracing its round edge with profound sadness. He did not yell, he did not scold. The silence in the room grew heavy, filled only with the rhythmic, distant ticking of the clock in the hall. "Yet," the father said softly, lifting his eyes to meet his son's, "you do exactly that every single day of your life. Every morning when you wake up, the Creator credits your account with 24 hours. They are pristine, full of potential, and entirely yours. And yet, you sit beneath the tree and allow them to vanish into thin air without producing a single drop of value, knowledge, or character. You must understand the ultimate law of this world, Lucas. Time is money. In fact, it is far more valuable. If you lose all your gold, a year of hard work can bring it back. But if you lose a single hour, all the gold in the king's treasury cannot buy back 1 second. Lucas looked at the pocket watch, its brass gears ticking visibly beneath a glass face. For a fleeting moment, the father's words felt heavy, like an anchor dropping into his mind. But as Lucas left the study and stepped out into the cool night air, the feeling dissolved. The illusion of infinite youth was too strong. He told himself that his father was simply old and cynical, obsessed with work. Lucas believed that he had an ocean of time remaining, and a few dropped cups would never empty it. He went to sleep, completely unaware that his first major bill was about to come due. Exactly 1 week later, an announcement spread through the brick streets like wildfire. A legendary master craftsman whose complex clocks and mechanical inventions were sought after by royal courts across the continent had arrived in the town. He was seeking a single apprentice, someone to learn his secret, rare trade. It was a position that guaranteed not just a skill, but immense wealth, status, and financial independence for life. The announcement stated that the master would select his apprentice at the town square pavilion at exactly 8 o'clock the following morning. Lucas recognized the immense magnitude of this opportunity. He knew that mastering this craft would secure his entire financial future. That night, he set his mind to go. The next morning, his internal clock woke him up before the sun. He dressed, ate a simple meal, and was ready to leave by 7 o'clock. But as he reached the front door, he looked out the window and saw a flock of migrating birds resting in the garden. The air was cool, the sun was just touching the hills, and a profound laziness washed over him. The square is barely a 10-minute walk from here, Lucas reasoned with himself, sitting down on a wooden bench by the window. I have more than enough time. If I arrive too early, I will just be standing in the cold fog. A few minutes of rest right now won't change anything. Time is free, after all. He closed his eyes, letting the minutes slide past like grains of sand through his fingers. He treated the morning currency as if it had no value, delaying his departure until the very last moment. When Lucas finally opened his eyes and glanced at the wall clock, his heart skipped a beat. It was 10 minutes to 8. He scrambled to his feet, burst through the front door, and began sprinting down the stone lanes. The cool morning air bit into his lungs as he ran, his boots clattering loudly against the bricks. He could hear the distant, heavy chime of the grand clock tower beginning to strike 8. The sound felt like a countdown, a sudden realization that his infinite resource was running out. He turned the final corner into the town square, gasping for breath, just as the final chime of the clock faded into the air. He pushed through the murmuring crowd, his eyes locked on the pavilion stage. But as he reached the steps, his path was blocked. The heavy iron gates of the pavilion had just been slid shut with a loud, absolute clang. On the other side of the iron bars, the master craftsman was already shaking the hand of another young man, a youth who had arrived early, standing patiently in the fog. Lucas banged his fist against the cold iron. "Master," he pleaded, his voice breaking, "please give me a chance. I am here. I missed it by only a single minute. Surely 1 minute cannot cost me my entire future." The master craftsman turned slowly. His eyes were cold, sharp, and precise, like the gears of his finest timepieces. He walked to the gate, looked down at Lucas's desperate face, and spoke with absolute clarity. "A single minute is the difference between a ship sailing and being left on the shore. The craft I teach requires absolute precision. A man who does not respect his own time will never respect the accuracy of my work. You did not lose this apprenticeship because you lacked talent, young man. You lost it because you refused to pay the price of punctuality." The master turned away, leaving Lucas standing alone against the iron gate as the crowd began to disperse. The silence of the empty square felt deafening. For the first time in his life, the abstraction of time became terrifyingly concrete. He had just traded a lifetime of wealth, luxury, and purpose for an extra 20 minutes of lazy sleep. The cost of his wasted time was a fortune he could never afford. He stood in the shadow of the giant clock tower, hearing its steady, mocking rhythm. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The world does not pause for regret. With his father's health declining and no trade of his own, Lucas was forced to face the harsh reality of survival. The premium opportunities were gone, only raw labor remained. He was forced to take a grueling, low-paying job at the town river docks. Every single morning, long before the sun broke through the eastern mist, he had to report to the harbor master. His life was no longer his own. It was entirely measured by the relentless demands of the cargo ships. His days became a continuous loop of physical agony. Under the burning, unyielding midday sun, Lucas carried massive wooden crates filled with iron ore, heavy spice barrels, and rough timber. The wood cut into his shoulders, and the rough hemp ropes tore the skin of his hands. For 12 hours a day, his existence was reduced to a brutal trade. He bartered his sweat, his muscle, and his bone for a handful of copper coins, barely enough to buy a loaf of stale bread and a cup of water. One scorching afternoon, during a brief 5-minute rest break, Lucas collapsed onto a rough wooden crate in the shade of a cargo hull. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his muscles trembled with fatigue. He turned his hands over, staring at the thick, painful yellow calluses and open blisters that now covered his palms. He looked at the single silver coin he had just been paid for a half-week of brutal labor. The absolute, terrifying math of life finally became clear to him. He realized that to earn that single piece of silver, he had to trade 12 hours of intense physical suffering. He thought back to the years he had spent sitting under the grand oak tree, letting months slide away without a care. He had thrown away thousands of hours, hours when his mind was sharp, his body was rested, and his opportunities were endless. If he had invested just 2 of those wasted hours every day into learning a trade, reading ledgers, or building a skill, he would be sitting in a comfortable merchant office today, instead of breaking his back on the stone piers. "I thought time was free," Lucas whispered into the empty air, his voice choked with emotion. "I thought it cost me nothing to wait. But now I see the truth. The hours I threw away were the most expensive things I ever owned. I am paying for them right now, every single day, with my youth, my strength, and my freedom." He understood that laziness isn't free. It is simply a loan with a massive hidden payment that you are forced to settle later in life. This is the immutable economic law of human existence. Time is not an abstract concept. It is your base capital. Every second you spend scrolling mindlessly through digital noise, delaying your goals, wallowing in excuses, or waiting for some magical, perfect moment to begin is a gold coin you are actively casting into the deep river. You cannot save it in a secure bank vault, you cannot borrow it from a friend, and you can never, ever buy it back from the past. The clock is a merchant that never stops trading, and it accepts no refunds. But true character is not defined by the mistakes you make, It is defined by the moment you decide to change. Lucas refused to let regret become his permanent prison. He could not alter the past, but he realized he still held the keys to his remaining hours. He made a quiet, solemn vow under the shadow of the docks. He would no longer spend his time. He would invest it with the precision of a master miser. A new discipline entered his life. After his grueling 12-hour shifts at the docks, when his bones ached and the other laborers headed to the local taverns to drink and complain about their fate, Lucas would walk straight back to his father's house. He would wash the salt from his skin, light a single tallow candle on his small wooden desk, and begin his second day of work. While the rest of the town slept in the quiet dark, Lucas conquered his exhaustion. He traded his sleep for knowledge. Hour after hour, under the dim candle flame, he studied advanced mathematics, cargo logistics, and the intricate laws of international trade. He asked his aging father to teach him the subtle nuances of market values and ship negotiations. Every spare minute during his midday breaks at the harbor was no longer spent staring at the clouds. It was spent reading tucked-away scripts and tracking ship schedules. He budgeted his time down to the exact breath. Within 2 years of this relentless nocturnal discipline, Lucas's deep investment began to bear immense interest. He noticed that the harbor's current cargo system was deeply flawed, wasting thousands of hours of labor due to poor ship tracking and disorganized storage layout. Using the mathematics and logistics he had mastered during those silent midnights, Lucas drew up a comprehensive, revolutionary blueprint for a restructured cargo management system. He brought it directly to the head of the town's merchant guild. The merchants were stunned. The plan was flawless, precise, and calculated to save the town a massive fortune in labor costs. The head guildmaster looked up from the parchment, staring at the young man who used to waste his days under the oak tree. "This is the work of a master organizer," the guildmaster noted. "A man who understands the exact value of a minute." Lucas was immediately taken off the heavy manual loading lines and hired as the chief director of harbor logistics, a prestigious role with a significant salary. Decades passed like the steady turning of a grand clock's gears, and Lucas's life transformed completely. Through his unyielding discipline and absolute respect for time, he grew the family trade into one of the most prosperous merchant empires in the entire valley. He became a man of immense financial wealth, deep wisdom, and widespread respect. He built a beautiful life, not through luck or sudden fortune, but by carefully purchasing his success with the minutes he used to throw away. Yet despite his immense luxury, his personal office remained completely minimalist and humble. Visitors who came to do business with him were always surprised to see that, on his primary mahogany desk, sitting right next to his gold ledgers, was not a glittering diamond or a royal medal. It was a simple, old, unpolished wooden clock with a visible brass pendulum that swung back and forth with an absolute heavy click. It was the very clock that had marked his hours during his darkest days of regret. To Lucas, that simple piece of wood was the most valuable asset in the entire building. It was a monument to his salvation. Whenever young men or ambitious apprentices came to his office looking for the secret formula to building a fortune and achieving greatness, Lucas would never speak of stocks, gold markets, or investment strategies. He would simply stop talking, turn his chair, and point his long, ringed finger directly toward the face of that ticking wooden clock. He would let the silence last for a few moments, forcing the youth to listen to the passing seconds before he spoke. Do not look for hidden secrets, shortcuts, or magical windfalls, Lucas would tell them, his voice rich with the deep gravity of experience. The greatest wealth you will ever possess in this life is ticking away right this very second inside your own pocket. You think wealth is something you earn in the future, but wealth is actually something you spend right now in the afternoon. A man who wastes his hours is a man who is actively manufacturing his own poverty. If you want to transform your financial destiny, you must first transform how you treat your average Tuesday. Never let yourself forget the lesson that Lucas paid for with the sweat of his youth. Your life is not measured in years. It is measured in how intentionally you utilize each passing block of 24 hours. Stop letting your potential bleed out into mindless distractions. Treat your time with the exact same respect, budgeting, and value that you treat your hard-earned money. Protect your mornings, invest your evenings, and honor the core of who you are. Be patient, be thankful, and keep moving forward in life.